Hello, and welcome back to the Podcasting Problem Solver. I am Leah Bryant, your go-to podcast growth strategist, here to help you podcast strategically with more clarity and better results. All right, to get us started, I want to ask you, have you ever felt like your podcast is doing quote unquote something, but you're not exactly sure what it's doing for your business? Like, you're posting episodes, maybe you're getting some downloads, maybe even a few DMs from listeners, but it's not translating into clients, leads, or revenue. And it's frustrating, right? You're putting your time and energy and creativity into every single episode, the planning, the editing, the promotion, and it feels like you're doing all the right things. But if there's no strategy connecting your podcast to your business, it's like you're running on a treadmill. Lots of effort, but not much forward motion, right? Well, friend, this is one of the biggest blind spots that I see with podcasters, especially with established entrepreneurs who already have successful businesses. They start a show thinking it'll naturally bring in clients, but then they realize 6 months later, there's a disconnect between what they're talking about and what they're selling. And that disconnect, it's the reason that your podcast might be working hard, but not strategically. And today we are going to fix that. I'm going to walk you through the 3-part strategy that turns your podcast into a client magnet. And the best part, it's not about more content. I know we're all cheering, right? It's about alignment. And I talk about this a lot on all the places, socials, in my newsletter, on here. And by the end of this episode, you'll know exactly how to make sure your podcast supports your business strategy so every episode you publish moves your listener one step closer to working with you. All right, so let's get started. First, I want to share some truth with you. Most podcasters start with execution, picking the mic, recording the intro, writing the show notes, but they skip right over strategy. And it's the most important part. They don't stop to ask the most important question, which is, how does my podcast actually fit into my business? And that's honestly where the gap starts, okay? If your podcast isn't connected to your business strategy, it's like you're building a beautiful house, but on somebody else's land. Sure, your house looks nice, but you don't own the foundation, okay? And strategy isn't just a fancy word that I'm throwing around here for planning. It's the foundation that decides what stories you tell, how you position yourself, and what kind of audience you attract. Without strategy, even the best content can get lost because there's no clear through line guiding your listeners from curiosity to conversion, okay? And in the strategy phase of my Seamless Podcast Framework, this is the very first thing that we fix. Because before we talk about growth, SEO, momentum, or anything like that, we need to know what success really means for you. Is it new leads? Is it nurturing existing clients? Is it thought leadership? And once you have those answers, those goals will dictate everything else from your content plan to your calls to action. So how do you align your podcast with your business strategy? I'm so glad that you asked. It comes down to 3 parts. The first is clarifying your core goal. So what is the point of your podcast right now? If your business goal is to attract coaching clients, your podcast purpose isn't just to educate, right? It's to qualify and nurture the people who are ready to work with you. Now, if your goal is brand authority, your podcast should showcase your expertise, your frameworks, and stories that position you as the go-to in your niche. For example, if you're a health coach who helps women manage stress, your goal might be to attract clients who are ready to invest in personalized guidance, not just those who want general wellness tips. So instead of broad how to relax episodes, you'd focus on topics that highlight your unique method, like the 3-minute reset routine I teach every client. See, without clarity, every episode feels like a random brainstorm. But with clarity, every episode becomes a breadcrumb, leading listeners straight to your offer. Number 2, we want to align topics to the buyer's journey. So every listener is somewhere on the spectrum, right? From, oh, hey, I just found you, to, oh my goodness, take my money, I'm ready to invest. And when you align your episode topics to those stages, you're no longer sharing content. You're actually building a client journey, right? So, for example, the awareness stage episodes teach a big picture concept or bust a myth. Think of your podcast like a path. Each episode should move someone a few steps closer to your offer. From the I didn't know I had this problem to, oh my gosh, I need your help solving it. And if you skip stages, your listeners get stuck in awareness. But when your topics flow naturally, they start self-identifying as the perfect fit for your services before you even make the offer, right? And then you have the consideration stage, where your episodes show your process, frameworks, or success stories. And then there's the decision stage episodes, where you focus on transformation, results, or next steps. That's how you create natural momentum. No pushy selling required, especially on my watch. All right, number 3, reverse engineer calls to action. So this is my jam and where most people fumble. They treat call to actions like an afterthought instead of a strategy tool, which they are. Your call to action should match the goal of the episode. So if you're building awareness, then your call to action might be, oh, hey, join my newsletter at leahbryantco.com/newsletter for more insights. If you're nurturing, go grab my free seamless podcast growth checklist at leahbryantco.com/growth checklist. And if you're ready for conversions, then that's when you say, hey, let's work together inside my seamless sprint, right? All of these links, by the way, are down below in the show notes. When your call to action aligns with your content, it feels helpful and not salesy, because that's what we want at the end of the day, right? We're here because we have a heart of service. We're helping people. Let me tell you about one of my clients. Her name is Sarah. So Sarah has a business coaching podcast that was consistent, but a little chaotic. And she knows I was going to say this, so she's okay with that. She had amazing conversations, but her episodes were all over the place. One week she talked about mindset, the next about sales funnels, the next about morning routines, and nothing really tied back to her actual coaching offers. So what we did inside her seamless sprint is we started her with this strategy phase. And the very first thing I asked her was, in which I ask everyone I go through with the seamless sprint, what do you want your podcast to do for your business? You know what she said? Well, Leah, honestly, I just wanted to bring in more clients. Okay, perfect. That's easy, right? So we mapped out her episodes to her buyer's journey. We refined her show description for SEO and podcast search optimization and positioning, right? And added simple call to actions that guided listeners to her coaching application page. And you know what happened? In 60 days, she went from random downloads to consistent consult calls. Yep, all from her podcast. And we tracked all of that, right? If you're not tracking your links in your show notes, you should be tracking that so you can tell what's coming from your podcast. And if you don't know how to do that, send me a DM on Instagram. I will show you quickly how to do this. You can do it with ChatGPT's help. Super easy. So send me a DM, Instagram, LeahBryant_co. And what I want to say here is that what changed wasn't her expertise. Not at all. But you know what did change? It was her message. Once her episodes started answering the exact questions her ideal clients were asking, she went from being a great listen to being the obvious next step. And that's the difference between a podcast that informs and a podcast that converts. Her content didn't change that much, but the intention behind it did. And that's what I want you to remember, okay? Because that's the power of alignment. So here's your takeaway today. If your podcast isn't currently driving business results, it's not necessarily that you have a visibility issue. But you want to know what your issue probably is? Well, it's a strategy issue. That magic happens when you connect your podcast purpose, which is why it exists, right? Your business goals, which is what you're building, and your content plan, which is how you get there. So here's something to ask yourself after you finish listening to this episode. If a new listener consumed my last 3 episodes, would they know what I do, who I help, and how they can take the next step? Well, if that answer is not clear, friend, that is your clue, because that's where the strategy needs to do its job. And that's where the Seamless Podcast Framework comes in, right? Specifically, what we've been talking about in this episode, the strategy phase, is where we define your podcast's role in your business. So every single episode supports your bigger picture and not just that content calendar that we're all tied to, right? Because when your podcast and business strategy are working together, that's when we collectively cheer, right? And that's when it becomes a true client magnet. So if you're listening to this and thinking, okay, Leah, I get it. I know my podcast could be doing more for my business. I just don't know where to start. Well, you are in luck, because that's exactly what we fix inside the Seamless Sprint. It's my 90-day one-on-one coaching program where we align your podcast with your business strategy, clean up your visibility gaps, and create a clear growth plan that turns your show into a sustainable marketing tool. You walk away knowing exactly what to say, how to measure success, and how to attract those clients through your podcast, not only with ease, but with, yep, that's right, strategy. You can learn more or apply to work together using the link down below. And if you've loved today's episode, hit follow wherever you're listening. Share it with a fellow podcaster who's ready to make their podcast work for them. And until next time, keep podcasting with purpose, keep it strategic, but most of all, keep it seamless. And I'll see you next time.